by Prime Minister Julia Gillard, as well as the enormous contribution of Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd. They have led and they have delivered an exceptional CHOGM. It is, as I said, a landmark CHOGM. Finally, I am deeply appreciative of the confidence shown in me by leaders in appointing me to serve this great global good for a further term, and thank you, Prime Minister, for mentioning it. I shall strive to live up to this confidence. I look forward with enthusiasm and commitment to doing so. I express our warm thanks to the people of Perth, whom we have inconvenienced, Western Australia, and Australia at large, for the warmth with which they have received us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll proceed now to take some questions. I'll take one from Phil Hudson.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Philip Hudson from the Herald Sun. And my question's to the President of the Maldives, and I'd like if you could respond also, and it relates to climate change. Yesterday, Sir Ronald Sanders from the Eminent Persons Group sat here at this stage, and he told us that the issue of climate change was urgent and that an expert group needed to be set up immediately. He was worried that the Commonwealth was not prepared in any way to deal with climate change, that some countries were at risk of disappearing, and the larger countries of the Commonwealth would be, I think his words were to the effect of, would be sort of find that they'd have an influx of climate refugees and people that have nowhere to go. So, Mr. President, are you happy with what the CHOGM meeting has done on this front?
Thank you. A number of the recommendations of the Eminent Persons Group touched upon climate change issues, and I'm glad that all the issues on climate change has been accepted by the heads, and we will therefore be able to do much better work through the Commonwealth in saving our islands and trying to find a solution, or trying to find better ways and means on how we may be able to deal with climate change issues. As you know, climate change issues are not something in the future. It is happening now, and we must deal with it now.
And can I respond by saying climate change issues have been ever present as leaders have had their discussions today, coming from this region of the world, participating in events like the Pacific Island Forum. Climate change is happening. It's in our region. When we meet as a Pacific Island community with representatives of Kiribati and Tuvalu, of course it is front and centre of their concerns, and so it has been at the CHOGM meeting as well. So we will, the focus of leaders was on climate change. One of the aims of the meeting was to canvass climate change issues so that we could project a voice into the important meeting in South Africa later this year, and we are projecting that voice by talking about the importance of carbon markets, the importance of action, the importance of the circumstances of small island nations. I'll turn now
if I may also, Prime Minister, if I may also add the brave steps taken by the people of Australia in coming with a carbon tax. I think these are the kind of measures that we would like to see from the rest of the developed world and big emitting countries.
Thank you. I'll ask the Prime Minister of Samoa.
Can I comment? The bottom line on climate change issues, of course, is the fast start funds, which have already been agreed and have been released through bilateral assistance, for instance, for the Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, are already assisting us in the Pacific in this respect. When we talk about issues on climate change, we are talking about a lot of things, for instance, sea walls, water, pipe water, etc., etc. And as I said, the action is more important, and through the funds we are able to do a lot of these things to answer for the problems caused by climate change.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take a question there. I think a friend from Canada, isn't it? Yes.
Minister. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. David Aiken from Sun Media in Canada. This is a question perhaps to any of the panellists if you wish to comment on this. Secretary General Sharma, you were saying that the CMAG, the new strength in CMAG, is one of the shining new things at this place. Bangladesh is a member of CMAG. Human Rights Watch, in its annual report, says the government of Bangladesh continue with extrajudicial executions and torture. The government of Bangladesh mounted sustained attacks on the right of freedom of expression to the media and political opposition. So please explain to us how Bangladesh is going to sit on a group that is going to monitor human rights violations in the Commonwealth.
All of the member states of the Commonwealth have subscribed to the values equally. And all of the member states, in subscribing to the CMAG at the highest level, have also quite openly indicated that they're prepared to engage in not only the subscription to these values, but to their achievement as well. And moving forward, the guidelines that have been given to the CMAG will take effect in respect of all member states equally. I do not feel that it is fair to isolate one country and start discussing what the issues may be.
If I may also add, the Maldives is also a member of the CMAG, and I can assure you we will not stop at any instance in trying to defend human rights. I understand, I hope that you know where I am coming from. We've just had our first multi-party elections in 2008. Prior to that, I spent half of my adult life in jail. So I can assure you that we will not stop at any instance in addressing human rights issues.
Thank you. We have a question over here. Yes, you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. This is Saleh Zafar. I am from Pakistan. I wish to know, since the Commonwealth is for the youth and support the investment in the youth, can Commonwealth has some time, at some point of time, during your chairmanship, a young Secretary General instead of an old Secretary General, and some lady should also take over this slot?
You know, in life what matters is not how old you are, but how young you think. And I hope that I've given enough evidence. I hope I've given enough evidence during my Secretary Generalship that I'm a young, thinking Secretary General. Some of the initiatives which I have introduced ever since I've come, I would like to think are landmark initiatives, and I'll mention only ones. For the first time in the Commonwealth Secretariat, there is a person deployed from a private commercial bank in order to share the experience worldwide in the Commonwealth of investing in youth businesses on a very simple motto which I introduced, which is, there's a discrepancy in your thinking that we can trust the youth with our future, but we can't trust them with our money. There has to be a rational way of encouraging young people to come to commercial banks and to be able to have financial support for projects which they have in mind. We're very fond of telling the youth, be jobs creators and not job seekers, but it's not clear how we are equipping them to do that or making it possible for them. So this initiative is there because you must mainstream youth activities. And one of the things which I am emphasizing all the time is that financial, trade, and industry bodies are very adult bodies. It's not enough to have just a Department of Youth or a separate youth credit initiative. The young in some parts of Africa, people 29 and under, are nearly 70% of the population. It's a rapidly a population that's rapidly becoming younger, and we have to find answers for that. I could give you many other examples, but I hope you'll be satisfied with this one.
Okay, we'll take a question here and then the lady in the green dress. Yes.
So, Paul Osborne from AAP. The EPG raised the question of tackling HIV and the issue of dealing with homosexual law reform. I was wondering why isn't it mentioned in the communique, and what was the outcome on the recommendations in the EPG report regarding those issues?
I would just like to say that the Secretary-General very often speaks on behalf of the organization. And I have made it absolutely clear that some of the domestic legislation in many of our countries, which is for the best part inherited from colonial times, is no longer consistent with the values to which our member states have subscribed, particularly eradication and non-acceptance of the principles of equality and non-discrimination. And I have urged our member states, in a way possible for them, to find legal ways to see, as has been done in some countries, to see whether a better harmonization can be achieved between their domestic laws and the values they have subscribed to in the Commonwealth.
Okay, we'll take the lady here in the green dress.
Thank you. Tessa Mays, I'm a reporter from London. In the interest of equality, a value that is heavily promoted here at this CHOGM, wouldn't it be time now to have an elected head of the Commonwealth so that any president or prime minister, regardless of race or sexuality or family background, could stand for that post, or indeed anyone in this room or anyone in the world?
I think we addressed your question on this yesterday when I was with Prime Minister Cameron, and I would adopt the words that we used yesterday. Combined heads of government did express their appreciation to Her Majesty for her role as head and as the point of unity for the Commonwealth, and particularly her role here in Perth. She was very generous with her time and playing a role in Commonwealth heads of government events. So I think by the thanking of Her Majesty, you've probably seen on display the attitude of heads of government here. I'll take a question from over here. Yes, you, sir.
I'm from Sri Lanka. You expressed concern about the killing of Australian soldiers in Afghanistan, but on the basis of allegations made by various human rights organizations, a section of the Commonwealth has been critical of Sri Lanka and making an attempt to undermine the Sri Lankan government. Would you like to explain, are you going to take on a government on the basis of allegations made by human rights organizations, who I believe are sometimes controlled by various interested parties?
I didn't hear every word of that question, I'm afraid. Could you just repeat the core of your question a little bit louder?
You expressed concern about the killing of Australian soldiers in Afghanistan.
Yes.
But on the basis of human rights allegations made against the government of Sri Lanka, you are attacking the Sri Lankan government over the past 2 years. A section of the Commonwealth countries is behind this move. Would you like to comment on this matter?
Well, I've made the view of Australia clear on this question in a number of these press conferences, and the Australian government has indicated consistently that we are concerned about allegations in relation to human rights, and we've made comments about the Lessons Learnt and Reconciliation Commission process and the need for it to address the work of the Secretary-General's UN Advisory Panel. So that is the position of Australia on that matter. Yes.
Louise Yaxley, ABC Radio. Can I ask what the leaders have discussed during this summit on measures to combat the higher and disproportionate rates of HIV/AIDS in Commonwealth countries? Secretary-General, you put your position, but what have the leaders decided at this summit, if anything, on the issue?
I didn't catch the issue.
She's asking what the leaders decided
The HIV/AIDS issue is included